Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
And welcome into Purple Access. Look, folks, free agency starts next week, okay? This is a huge week, and we have brought in the big guns here, Zulgad, Scoggins, and batting cleanup, Kevin Seifert, who of course worked with both of us at the Star Tribune, all at one time covering the Vikings. Chip now, of course, a columnist for the Star Tribune. Kevin now covering the Vikings and various other NFL things for ESPN. And boys, thanks for the time. I want to start you guys with this because I've babbled about this for 2 weeks now. I want to hear, and Kevin, we'll start with you. What is your working theory on all of this reporting and all of the things that we're seeing when it comes to Sam Darnold and what's going on with him and the Vikings?
Yeah, it feels to me, Judd, that it's not too different from the way things went with Kirk Cousins last year, which was there was a world where they wanted to have Kirk Cousins back, would have taken him back. But as it became clear to them and everybody that the Falcons were going to blow everybody out of the water, that kind of became a moot point. Really, the only difference here is that it isn't public, at least, who, if anyone, would be willing to blow the Vikings, whatever the Vikings are willing to pay Sam Darnold for next year, out of the water. And so I think there's just been a general assumption, and just because somebody's not reporting it certainly doesn't mean that there's not interest, but there's been a general assumption that there would be interest from teams who want him to be their starter for next year and potentially after, beyond that, and would want him at a salary that the Vikings probably wouldn't go to, knowing that they have J.J. McCarthy on the roster. I still have to assume that they believe that that's what's going to happen. Like, to bring back a guy who threw for 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns for another year and say, hey, we've got this young guy and we're gonna see what he can do. Like just out of respect and just out of the way locker rooms work, it would be hard to tell Sam Darnold, hey, come back and come compete for your job, and you may or you may not play the whole season depending on what happens with another guy. And so I've struggled to see how that could work. I'd be eager to hear it explained if and when that comes about. Mm-hmm. But I continue to believe that the Vikings feel, and probably with some justification, that there will be more lucrative offers for Sam Darnold elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm sort of struggling with the whole logic of it, to be honest with you. It makes no sense to me. It is similar to Cousins in the respect that you had a veteran who played pretty good ball for you, and in Sam's case, really good ball for you. But the X factor is you have J.J. McCarthy on your roster now, and you didn't last year. And so you signed Sam last year with the understanding that he's a bridge quarterback and that you're drafting a rookie. If you brought him back for more expensive money, which I'm guessing it wouldn't be less than $25 million, is he a bridge? Is he a multi-year guy? What are you telling JJ? And why wouldn't you spend that money on your trenches where this team desperately needs to get better at if anybody paid attention to the playoffs? So I understand probably just going through the motions, or not motions, but going through the whole exercise of talking to them and kind of seeing what the market bid is. But even though they couldn't find a partner with the tag, I don't know that necessarily means there won't be a market for Sam where he gets 25, 30 million. I don't think he's getting 40 million, but the logic doesn't make sense to me. Bringing him back, it really doesn't.
Yeah, and I guess the way it could be explained is, simply you can never have too many quarterbacks. And
yeah,
after seeing what happened with J.J. McCarthy last year, getting hurt in the preseason, and all of a sudden what they thought was a deep room was a little bit less deep. And if there's guys willing to come back at numbers that you can do, collect as many good ones as you can, and figure it out later. Trust the coach that you just gave the contract extension to make it work in the locker room. As counterintuitive as it feels to us, as a bunch of old traditional guys, there might be something to be said for just, pile it up, have as many as you can have, and then figure it out. And if you really think that you have an untenable situation at the end of camp, maybe there's a way to trade Sam, or I wouldn't go into it thinking could do that, but maybe that opportunity would come up. But I guess that would be the best justification that I can think of, is just, not letting good quarterbacks walk out the door.
I'm curious what that number would be to where Sam would say yes, but you also feel like it's not so restrictive that you need to address the other issues on your roster. Is it? And Rob Brzezinski's a genius, and he can make the money. He can, he can do magic with the cap and all that. But I think the priority has to be fixing the. I just don't know what that number would be that they would feel comfortable. I mean, clearly the Cousins, they had a number, right? We're not, and it might have been guaranteed or whatever, but they had a number that they were not going, and Atlanta went way past it. But I'm just curious what that number would be.
Yeah. Like what, Kevin? Like 20? Because 25-ish, and that's high, but
right. And you wouldn't want it to be in a vacuum. You'd want it to be in the context of what's the number. What does this number need to be in order for us to sign the free agents that we think we should sign? And there's a lot of people that will tell you this is not the strongest free agent class in the history of the NFL's off season. And so I don't know if this is the way the Vikings view it, and they may not be able to afford to view it this way because they have so many holes on their roster. But if there's not enough people out there that they're wanting or willing to spend the money on, then maybe you do spend the money on Darnold. If there's only a handful of guys that you'd be willing to put real money to, and you're not going to sign all of them, and you think in general it's a weak free agent class and you're not going to be able to fill all your holes that way, then maybe you do say, okay, we can actually use that money, 25 or 30 million or whatever on Sam Darnold as a cap number for this year, in that context.
Yeah, Kev, you alluded to this, and this is the one thing you'd never be able to really you can't put a number on this, but this year there was no threat of JJ behind him. If you bring him back, there is a threat of JJ behind him. And how does that factor into the psyche of if he doesn't get off to a good start, and you're hearing, we want JJ, from the stands.
And certain media jackals, one of whom might be in the middle panel of this
press
podcast.
Box with a bullhorn.
That's right.
Hey, McCarthy.
Well, you didn't have that hanging over him, Sam, at all, so he could play free knowing there was nobody coming in to replace him. There was no idea of he knew he was a bridge, but it wasn't – he wasn't going to get replaced last year, no matter what happened, I don't think.
Yeah.
So how would that factor into the deliberations? Like, that could be really awkward if JJ's healthy and he's, how does he handle it? How's JJ handle if he brought him back? Like, hey, he's probably thinking, what do you say at the I forgot when it was, right after season, I want a fair and opportunity.
Yeah, he told Rich Eisen, all I want is a fair shot.
Yeah, but what's weird to
if
me,
if they bring Sam back, is that a fair shot? I would say no, right?
And what's weird from Sam's standpoint and his reps guys is this, if he comes back here, it's not going to be on I don't think a long-term contract. It might be a year, it might be two, but the reality is, his last two games were eye-opening disasters. But the reality for Sam is he also had a really good body of work. So are you going to pass up your one chance to make, he signs a 3-year contract with the Steelers, the Raiders. That's your chance to make a killing. You might succeed, you might fail. But anything back here to me feels like a short-term thing. And Kevin, to your point, if he gets benched for McCarthy, now the value plummets again. So I guess what I don't get is through the reporting, and it's clearly what people are being told, but through the reporting, I don't see, to Chip's point, where the common sense is. Like, how does this make sense? And I don't think it makes sense for the Vikings, but I really think it does not make any sense for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and some of it will depend on what is ultimately out there for him. I guess in theory, coming back to the Vikings to, hold off JJ McCarthy for one more year might be his best option, especially if he has a good year doing it. We've seen it's not unusual for players to take the less lucrative offer. I mean, I think when you hear people say he turned down more to go, to come here, like that is actually true. Like that happens. It may not be dramatically different money, but it's not unusual for someone to take into account where you're going more than just how much you're being paid. But you don't often see players take the option where their playing time is less guaranteed than somewhere else. Like that,
That's it, yeah.
Like that's like kind of the basic thing. Like I remember Daniel Jones saying that at the end of the season, like, did this about spending the time on the practice squad, and he's like, you want to, it was good for me, but everybody wants to play, and like that's the whole reason you're doing it. You want to get paid, obviously, but the best way to get paid over time is to be playing. And so it might be his best option if it turns out that there's nobody really knocking his door down or giving him any more guarantees to play than he would have if he was coming here. But it would be certainly be very unusual for him to choose to come back here when, the Steelers or the Raiders or the Titans or somebody was saying, hey, come here and be our starter for 2025.
You get a sense being at the combine, Kev, like, I know it's, you can't really trust a whole lot when you're there, but like what his market's going to be?
Yeah, I actually did not go to the combine this year, but my sense in talking to people who were there is that, there's nobody feels like he is in a position where he's going to get like a 5-year, $200 million, 4-year, $200 million contract. Like he's not going to be a $50 million a year guy. Had he played as well as he did in the first 15 games of the year and or 16 games in the year and the last 2 games of the year, maybe that would be different. But there's, I from what I've heard, like there's generally a feeling that if he gets a free agent contract, that it's going to be Baker Mayfield plus inflation. And so that's 3 years, 100 million plus inflation.
Which that makes sense. But even, I don't know how they can structure that to where it really only is 1 year guaranteed or whatever. But even that, you're right. For him, I got to imagine he's going to want to go be guaranteed, as much as you can be guaranteed anything in the NFL, guaranteed to be a starter versus if he comes back here. I mean, are they guaranteeing him the starter, or are they going to say it's going to be a competition in camp? Is it going to be?
Yeah, I mean, even if they say, and I think generally speaking on the scale of the NFL, like O'Connell, Kwesi, like their word means something. But even if they say, yeah, you're our guy, like if JJ McCarthy is just killing it in training camp and he goes out in the preseason and he just kills it. And like, I don't know if he's ready to do that or not, but like, it's certainly within the realm of possibility. And he's just blowing everybody away. And it's like, it's obvious this kid's ready to go. Like, are they still going to say, well, no, we promised Sam, like
that's right.
It's his job. Yeah. Like that doesn't work on any level. Like the players, how does Justin Jefferson feel like if the best quarterback is not playing because, well, we promised, so if you're Sam, and I don't even know that they would make a promise like that, but if you're Sam, I think you just know that it's contingent.
You're the
on
placeholder.
You're
the placeholder.
It's you're same as it was last year. Your job is contingent on you being the best quarterback on the roster, and you can't totally control that. You can be just as good as you've been, but if the other guy gets that much better, then you're not the best quarterback on the roster.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've said from the beginning, to me, you turn it over to JJ and try as best you can to sign Daniel Jones to be your bridge or your whatever emergency plan B if things go bad. Now, I don't know what the market says about Daniel Jones. Maybe somebody will throw him a starting job. I don't know. I tend to doubt it. I don't know what his value is right now. He's not like he's selling high on himself, but there's a lot of
he has to take into account where he goes as well, the same way Sam did last year when he came to Minnesota.
Yes.
If you're Daniel Jones and you go to Tennessee to be the starter until Cam Ward's ready or something,
Yeah.
And you just get beat up, and
Yes.
and the receivers are not exactly, then you're just, are you ever going to start again?
Yeah.
If you go to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh has a lot of things going for it, but it hasn't had a quarterback that has sort of maintained his job since Ben Roethlisberger departed. And so if you go to Pittsburgh and you get beat up and you don't play very well, or you're in a scheme that doesn't really work for you, are you ever going to start again? And so, like, if he puts together 3 or 4 good games in Minnesota before J.J. McCarthy is ready, if that's the scenario that happens, or he plays at some point during the season and puts together 3 or 4 games, then he's suddenly maybe given himself a much better chance for 2026. And it's hard to think about that when you're a 27-year-old player and you want to get on the field, and it's hard to think 2 years in advance, but
yeah,
he needs to think about that as well.
Well, and Sam to me is at a point with the body of work from 2024 where he should go. Like he should go and get paid, and it might work. It doesn't work. I don't know, but he gets paid. Daniel Jones, it's much more precarious because he's sort of like, he's basically a month plus into the QB rehab program that O'Connell has, right? And so, like, to your point, Kev, if he goes to Cleveland and it blows up, and Cleveland, I think Stefanski is a good coach. I think Cleveland's a mess right now so if that blows up, okay, now you're not going to get paid. So, like, to me, it makes way more sense for Jones to come back, in air quotes, compete.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't win the job, but he gets good experience. And if, McCarthy's not prepared to play or he's hurt, he plays. That's where the Darnold thing is tough for me to reason with, because I don't understand what's the incentive to come back and possibly sit. Here's a question, though, for both of you guys. It's gonna sound like a weird question, but as Kevin said, this is the second consecutive year we've been through this. Is Kevin O'Connell either very savvy, or does he find quarterback breakups difficult? Like, I just find it very interesting that the Vikings with Kirk and now with Sam, because like, they're going out on really good terms, right? We want you back. We want you back. Is this being driven by O'Connell as sort of window dressing because of how he feels about that position? And I do think he really likes Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold.
I would say yes on both of those. I mean, I think he is savvy, but I also think he has an emotional attachment that's unlike anything I've seen. Kevin, you've done this a lot longer than me. Unlike anything I've seen a head coach have, he talks about, the journey and having lived through it and being in the meeting rooms and the red pen meeting. And I just think he has such a emotional investment in helping guys reach their potential that probably is hard. I mean, he probably, I think a lot of us are looking at the last 2 games, whereas Kevin's probably looking at the first 16 games and thinking, maybe I could have done something differently in those last 2 to help him. And hit this first 16, I'm not going to, lose track of that. So maybe there's some of that, you had a guy who played hell for part of some year. People were talking about, is he the MVP? I mean,
yeah.
So I think there is, and this also might be just part of the greater game plan that we have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. But I do think when you listen to him, hear him talk, just the emotional investment and attachment he has to the guys he coaches, that's like unlike anything I've seen.
And I also think that he puts a lot of emphasis just on the culture side in making the Vikings a place that people want to be and work for and want to stay and play for. And part of that is how you treat people on the way out. And so I think that's like, and it's not just that they don't rip people on the way out, where you do hear and see that in sports all the time, or have things leaked out that intentionally that paints, a bad picture for that particular person. I think that's a big part of why O'Connell was kind of talked about Cousins that way last year and Darnold this year, is to like end it on a good note in a way that doesn't make people who might be considering coming to the Vikings or are working at the Vikings think that you're, just a piece of meat that's going to be discarded coldly on the way out. And so I don't know if that's the primary reason, but I know he thinks about that a lot, and I think that's part of it. And the other part is, like last year, I think that they were kind of thinking / hoping that somebody would blow them out of the water, that they made Cousins an offer, a legitimate offer, but under the guise of like knowing that there was going to be a better one out there. And maybe some of what O'Connell is saying and what the Vikings are sort of signaling is to, hey, we're serious. We might bring him back. You better step up, And so there's, I think, a little bit of that as well.
Well, it did. I mean, his quote at the combine just jumped out. He's like, Sam showed the rest of the league that he can be a quarterback. or he showed the league, the NFL.
Yeah.
It's like, he didn't just show us; he showed 31 other teams that he can be.
Didn't he? Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
well, and he also said, he also, I believe it was at the Super Bowl when he was going through the car wash there. He also used a quote, if I'm not mistaken, that Mike McDaniel has used like on 3 Dolphins players, all of whom left, which is he deserves to become a free agent.
Yeah.
He said that, I think, also the night that he won Coach of the Year. So
okay.
And he said that about Kirk as well. And he's kind of tried to not walk it back, but say, I saw in some other podcasts that he's done. He's been a big podcast guy.
National though, no local.
National. Yeah. Get him on Purple Daily.
Yeah,
we do once a year.
You can do a 4 box here. And so he's tried to not walk it back, but say, look, all I'm saying is that he's proven that he's, a player that is, he said, like, when I was a player, I didn't earn the right to be a free agent. I wasn't good enough to be a free agent and be a guy that teams were interested in. And that Sam and Kirk Cousins the year before have played in a way and created value in a way that they earn the right to be a free agent that teams are bidding on.
Mm-hmm. All right. The negotiation period, i.e. legal tampering, starts on Monday. The free agency period, I believe, starts at 3 o'clock our time on Wednesday. Chip, we'll start with you. How much movement are you expecting, since the Vikings, I think it is still have the 7th most salary cap space? We've talked about this a lot. Guard, defensive tackle, cornerback.
There's going to be a defensive tackle there at 301.
That's my question. What's your expectation when the reports from Schefter and the boys start to come out on Monday about agreements being reached?
I want an email at 301 to hit the inbox that there's the press conference is coming up that they're signing a defensive tackle. We talked about last week that I've waffled between offensive guard and defensive tackle. I'm going defensive tackle. Find the best defensive tackle you can on the market. Pay him big money. Get just a massive rush, guy can collapse the pocket, and combine him with those 2 and 3 now, I guess, if you count Dallas Turner, edge rushers, and really have a top of the line defense line. So I think when you have that kind of money, you got to make a splash, and it's got to be in the trenches. I won't be surprised if it's offensive guard, but I'm saying defensive tackle and early.
Yeah, when we had to do a sort of a fun fantasy like bidding war for the top 10 free agents that we have listed, and I put in bids for a couple guys and was awarded Milton Williams, the Eagles defensive tackle, for I think it was like 4 years, $90-some million with a bunch of guarantees in there. And so that's a name that, like, I think in terms of who's the best defensive tackle out there, that probably is the one to keep an eye on. Some of it'll be, did they get Byron Murphy signed before free agency starts? Yeah. Because if they didn't, and he hits the open market, I don't know whether that means that he's gone or what, but they have many cornerbacks to sign and or draft. And so, like, that's another thing. But the math in terms of how many people they have on expiring contracts, all the 1-year deals they did last year, and the various people who are eligible for free agency in some way, shape, or form, means that they're going to be very active. It may not be all big names. There'll be a wave of that. I mean, they need multiple running backs probably. They need at some point between now and the draft, they need 3 cornerbacks probably. They might need 2 safeties depending how Harrison Smith's decision making goes and what happens with Cam Bynum. and then that's just to get back to base, before you start saying, okay, we need to improve at defensive tackle, or we need to get new guards or centers or what have you. And so, but just the math of how many people's contracts are expiring, and the fact that even if they get when they get a compensatory pick, they'll still only have 4 draft picks, means that there's just going to have to be a lot of veteran players signed, maybe not in the first couple days, but over the course of the first few weeks of free agency to sort of fill out the roster.
Yeah, hey, Seif, Judd and I talked about this last couple of weeks, but what do you think it'll get it done to get Murphy re-signed in terms of?
I mean, he's
average.
I mean, he had the best season of his career, and he's only 27. That's the other thing. It's like he's on his 3rd contract. This will be his 3rd contract. He's only 27 because he came into the league real early. So I don't know about the numbers. I haven't looked at it too heavily, but like I would imagine that he's going to have to be, if he gets to the
18 million.
Yeah, if he gets to the open market, and I look at more in terms of like compared to the other players, he's going to have to be a top 5 paid cornerback, I would think.
But I think you've got to do it though. You've got to re-sign him.
Yeah, and he's very good in for his scheme, and like you need to have, that's an important position,
That's one I'd like to get done like on Sunday though. Like I feel like if he hits the market, it's gonna be difficult.
Yeah, and again, like people don't always take the very highest bid, but like the bids will, given what the market looks like and given how that's a perpetual need for every NFL team every year, it's hard to imagine him not doing very well on the open market.
Kevin, what's your sense on guard? Because I will say this. So the Bears traded a 4th round pick to the Chiefs today for Joe Thuney, who was at left tackle, but he'll move back now to left guard. So the Bears did improve themselves, but they also probably got out of the market a little bit. The Vikings clearly need at least a guard, if not 2.
Yeah.
But what's your sense on like their price point here? Or do they try and go with a veteran guy who gives them stability, but signs a shorter and slightly cheaper contract?
No, I think, they need to improve their play there. And I think, they talked a little bit about it at the combine when they hired a new assistant offensive line coach. And I don't know that the assistant offensive line coach has the big impact, but he
certainly isn't liked by the masses.
No, he's a
got headlines.
He's a hard driver. And so like, that's a little bit of it, but I think that, there's going to have to be at least one, signed in one starting caliber guard signed in free agency, if not 2. And there's not many of them. So they're going to have to, I think that's a place where they're going to have to spend some money. And, whether that doesn't mean that they need to sign somebody to the equivalent of a Steve Hutchinson contract, but, to go into the draft and, needing to get a starting guard is not a good idea. We did talk about, and I'm not sure how much, but I've heard his name a few times, even in this offseason. I think we talked the last time Chip and I were on with you, Judd, about Walter Rouse, who was drafted last year, and he's this huge guy. He's a left tackle in college, but I think there's some thought that he could be a guard, and I don't want to peg him as a guy they're just going to pull out of the obscurity and make into a starting guard for next year, but. It's got to, like, this project has to be a combination of bringing people in from the outside and finding who you have internally to compete there as well. So that, to me, that's a name to consider when you say that, it would be great to sign 2 veteran guards, but the chances of that are not as high.
Yeah, I would say they're gonna have to be creative, right? They're gonna have to say, hey, this guy, we draft him as guard, or as tackle, but let's look at him at guard, and maybe we'll strike gold there with that. Because I have to think, that 1st round pick is going to be a corner. I mean, with your needs there.
It's possible. I mean, you could make an argument for multiple positions. Like it could be defensive tackle. It's a very deep defensive.
If you don't sign one, sign one in free agent. I think either your 1st round pick or your big splash in free agency has to be defensive tackle, and then
that makes sense.
Yeah. I prefer not to draft a guard 1st round, but you definitely need a guard. I'm probably going to the open market for at least a guard. But yeah, the defensive tackle class is fantastic. The running back class is good. I think that they can nab a running back probably third round.
Well, I look forward to the Purple Daily podcast when the Vikings draft a running back in the first round.
Well, I got one for you. If it's
you
Genty,
need
I'll
an
take it.
Emergency podcast.
If you get Genty, yeah.
If you get Genty, I'm all on board.
Okay,
I'm all
that's fine. If
good
he falls
ship
to 24,
lollipop.
yeah.
But if it's somebody else, no, I'll blow a gasket. Yeah. I'll blow a freaking gasket if they draft a running back.
Emergency breaking into
emergency.
Coverage.
No, we got a draft party.
Oh, that's right.
At the Fillmore. I'll melt down there. It'll be great.
Yeah.
A public meltdown. Even better.
It'll be great. I'll get a couple of Padres beers, drink them quickly, and melt down. Last thing, at what point in time, and Kevin Chip and I talked about this, I think, on the show 2 or 3 weeks ago. At what point in time does it become a story that Kwesi Adolphe-Mensa's contract himself, and he's under contract through 2025, but at what point with O'Connell done does it become a story in your mind if it's still not signed and not done?
I mean, it's kind of a story already because I was going to say that if they go into the draft with basically a lame duck general manager, then that's concerning because no matter what anybody says, that implies that the draft performance is going to be part of the evaluation about what type of extension he's going to get or what the ultimate agreement would be. Right. But maybe even free agency. We just got done talking about how many people they need to add and like the decisions that have to be made and the quarterback and at so many other positions. And this is not to say that Kwesi in a on his own would be making different decisions because he's not signed long term but the worst case scenario when you have a general manager in the final year of his contract is that he's making decisions based on short-term immediate impact and not doing what you want the general manager to do, which is follow the long-term vision and do things that may not have an immediate positive outcome, but will over time. And again, that's not to say Kwesi would necessarily do that, but that's what you worry about. And especially with the draft. I mean, because we all know like do you draft for need? Do you draft for talent? Do you draft for people who are going to start, help you in 2025, or is it a play for 2026 or 7? And like you don't want like a general manager to have to wonder if a player he's going to take is going to help the next guy win. And I don't, like there's never been a hint of a shred of a rumor that he is, his job security is in doubt or that he's not going to, this is his last year or anything along those lines. But, when you're not like, when the owners have you signed have only committed to you for one more year, it certainly opens that possibility. So I think it's starting to already be a story. We keep getting told that they're working on it, it's coming, it's not a big deal, but like the gap between the O'Connell, since the O'Connell extension, which was clearly their priority, was clearly the one that they wanted to get done and let everybody know about right away, for good reason. They needed to sign him and he deserved it, and it was the right thing to do. Like nothing wrong there, but it can happen pretty quickly when everybody's on the same page. And in this case, it's clear that they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's odd. I mean, you're asking a guy to make picks for the future when he's only under contract for 1 year. And if you're saying, well, let's wait and see how he drafts. Well, you're not going to know if this draft class is any good or not. I mean, you have no idea. You may think but we have no idea. And that's for any team. Like right after a draft, you have no clue how good it's going to be. So if that's the reasoning, it's like, well, you're not really going to glean anything. Yeah, they're going to draft guys that you think are going to help you, but you don't know. So, but we're reporters. The longer it goes, the higher the antenna goes. Like, what is going on here? Why is this taking so long? So, but it is unusual, I would say, that particularly because whenever we had the exit press conference, Kwesi and KOC both said, they had dialogue with the owners, in the few days right after, and they've presumably talked about their contracts. And here we are, is it 2 months?
Yeah.
Almost?
Yeah. I mean, and what you can glean out of it, is that clearly the owners put on the table what it needed to be done to sign the coach of the year.
Yeah.
And clearly they have not put on the table what Kwesi thinks, I assume, he should be,
Yeah.
he
Why
should
is
be
it not
getting
done?
as the general manager of a team that's won 34 games in 3 years.
I'm just curious if the timelines are different from O'Connell, because so much of with Spielman and Zim, it was, hey, they're married. The timelines are married.
Yeah.
I think it's not going to be married this
Yeah,
timeline.
I mean, it's already like I think you can already say that. Like, if the timetables were the same, and we're going to be the same, they would have done. Yeah. They had no. I mean, they could have signed O'Connell and kept it a secret for a while, and waited until they had one for both of them, but they didn't.
Yeah. Yep.
Sports divorce, nothing like it. There's nothing like sports divorce.
Wow.
It's controversial. What, you got to choose one side. You become susceptible to backstabbing. I love a good sports divorce.
Right now they're in mediation, I think.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. All right, gentlemen, thanks much. The Darnold thing continues to I just am as confused as possible by that one. So, all right, boys, Chip Scoggins, Kevin Seifert, Judd Zulgad, thanks for tuning in to Purple Access.